The morning of May 17, 1943 broke clear and moonlit over the industrial heartland of Germany's Ruhr Valley. At precisely 2128 hours, Wing Commander Guy Gibson pushed the throttles forward on his Avro Lancaster bomber, call sign AJG, and felt the aircraft strain against an unprecedented load. Suspended beneath the fuselage in a specially designed rotating cradle hung a weapon unlike anything seen in warfare. Cylindrical bomb weighing 9,250 pounds, designed not to fall like conventional ordnance but to skip across water like a stone thrown by a child. The target lay 400 miles ahead across occupied Europe, the MGN, a massive gravity structure holding back 140 million tons of water that powered the factories fueling Germany's war machine. Gibbs' approach that night would be described in official reports as brilliant, by his fellow pilots as audacious, and by German survivors as otherworldly. He would release his spinning bomb at an altitude measured in feet rather than thousands of feet, at a speed so precise that a variation of 5 miles per hour would mean failure, from a distance so exact that error margins were calculated in yards, not miles. The bomb would skip across the reservoir surface like a flat stone on a pond, strike the dam wall, sink while still spinning, and detonate at a depth calculated to channel explosive force directly into the structure's weakest point. What happened in those final seconds of Gibson's attack run, and why this seemingly impossible method was chosen over conventional bombing, reveals a story not of military might overwhelming an enemy, but of engineering brilliance solving a problem that brute force could never address. The question hanging in the moonlit air above the Möhne Dam that May night was not whether Germany's dams could be destroyed conventional. Wisdom said they could not, but whether any crew possessed the skill and nerve to deliver Barnes's Wallis's revolutionary weapon under conditions that permitted no margin for error. To understand why 19 Lancaster bombers carrying weapons were converging on 3 German dams in a single night, one must first grasp the peculiar strategic importance of water in industrial warfare. The Ruhr Valley, stretching across western Germany, contained the industrial heart of the Third Reich. Krups, steelworks, chemical plants, coal mines, and armaments factories produced a substantial portion of Germany's war material. These facilities required enormous amounts of electrical power and water for cooling, processing, and transportation. The dams serving the Ruhr Valley were engineering marvels. Constructed in the early 20th century, the Möhne Dam, completed in 1913, stood 131 feet high and 2,100 feet long, its massive gravity construction holding back a reservoir containing 140 million cubic meters of water. The Eder Dam, even larger at 154 feet high, controlled water flow for the Weser River system. The Sorp Dam, of different earthfill construction, regulated additional water supplies. Together, these structures controlled water and hydroelectric power that sustained the region's industrial output. British strategic planners had identified the dams as potential targets early in the war, recognizing that their destruction would flood factories, disrupt transportation networks, cut electrical power, and force diversion of resources to repair and recovery efforts. But identifying a target and successfully attacking it were entirely different challenges. Conventional bombing doctrine of 194 to 1943 relied on dropping thousands of bombs from high altitude, accepting that most would miss their targets but calculating that statistical probability ensured some would hit. This approach worked reasonably well against large area targets like cities or factory complexes where new misses still caused damage. But dams presented a fundamentally different problem. The massive concrete and stone structures were designed to withstand enormous hydraulic pressure. A bomb striking the top of a dam, even a large bomb, would cause localized damage, but not structural failure. The dam's mass simply absorbed the explosive force. To destroy a dam required delivering explosive force to the structure's base, where water pressure worked constantly to push the wall outward. A detonation at this critical point, timed and positioned correctly, could crack the dam's foundation and allow water pressure to complete the destruction. The challenge was that the base of the dam sat beneath hundreds of feet of water, unreachable by conventional bombs that detonated on impact or shortly thereafter. Torpedoes seemed a logical solution. They traveled underwater and could theoretically strike the dam wall below the waterline. But the Germans had anticipated this, installing heavy torpedo nets across the reservoirs that would snag any torpedo before it reached the dam face. Anti-aircraft batteries ringed the dams, and the reservoir's geography limited approach angles for attacking aircraft. Barnes Vaught, the same engineer who would later develop the Tallboy and Grand Slam bombs, approached the dam problem from first principles rather than adapting existing weapons. A brilliant engineer who had designed the geodetic airframe used in Vickers Wellington bombers, Wallis possessed an unusual combination of theoretical knowledge and practical problem-solving ability. He understood structural engineering, hydrodynamics, explosives, and aeronautics disciplines that rarely intersected in a single mind. Wallis's breakthrough came from reconsidering how the explosive force should be delivered. Instead of trying to penetrate the water to reach the dam's base, what if the bomb traveled across the water's surface before sinking? He remembered childhood memories of skipping stones across ponds, a simple recreation that demonstrated a principle of physics. A spinning object striking water at the correct angle, and velocity would bounce rather than immediately. The concept seemed absurd to military professionals. When Wallis first proposed it in 1942, bombs felt that was their fundamental nature. The idea of a bomb that skipped contradicted decades of ordnance development. But Wallis had done the mathematics. A cylindrical bomb, given sufficient backspin, released at very low altitude at precise speed, would skip across water in a series of diminishing bounces, each bounce carrying it closer to the dam wall. Upon striking the wall, the bomb's remaining forward momentum would carry it downward while still spinning, pressed against the concrete by its rotation. It would sink to a predetermined depth where a hydrostatic fuse would trigger detonation. The explosion, occurring deep underwater directly against the dam wall, would create a hammer blow of hydraulic pressure channeled into the structure. The water itself became a medium for transmitting explosive force, transforming liquid into a weapon. Wallis calculated that 6,600 pounds of explosive, detonated 30 feet below the surface against the dam wall, would generate shockwaves sufficient to crack even the MGN dam's massive construction. Water pressure would then force its way into these cracks, widening them until the structure failed catastrophically. The theoretical elegance was undeniable. The practical challenges seemed insurmountable. The bomb would need to be cylindrical rather than streamlined, approximately 60 inches in diameter and 50 inches long, weighing over 9,000 pounds when filled with explosives. It would need to spin backwards at precisely 500 revolutions per minute at the moment of release. Any faster and it might break apart under centrifugal force. Any slower and it wouldn't skip properly. The aircraft would need to fly at exactly 60 feet above the water surface higher, and the bomb would break apart on impact. Lower, and the aircraft might strike the water. Speed would need to be precisely 240 miles per hour faster, and the bomb might skip over the dam wall entirely. Slower, and it wouldn't reach the wall. Release distance had to be exactly 425 yards from the dam wall to far, and the bomb would sink before reaching the target. Too close, and the skip pattern would be wrong. At night, because daylight attacks would face overwhelming defensive fire. In moonlight, because complete darkness would make the precision flying impossible. All 19 aircraft would need to attack within a single night, because the Germans would certainly strengthen defenses after the first attack. The Air Ministry's initial response to Wallis's proposal was skeptical. The requirements seemed impossible to achieve in combat conditions. Flying at 60 feet at night, at precise speed, maintaining exact distance from a defended target while releasing a spinning cylindrical bombage element alone was difficult. Combined, they appeared suicidal. But strategic bombing campaign results in 1942 had been disappointing. Thousands of bombs dropped, relatively little critical infrastructure destroyed. The dam proposal, however unlikely, offered potential for disproportionate strategic impact from a single successful raid. In February 1943, approval came for Operation Chastise. A single squadron, number 617, would be formed specifically for the mission. composed entirely of volunteers drawn from experienced crews. They would train intensively for 3 months, developing the skills necessary to deliver Wallis's weapon under the extraordinary conditions required. The squadron would be commanded by Wing Commander Guy Gibson, a 24-year-old veteran with exceptional flying skills and proven leadership, having already completed 2 tours of bomber operations and 1 tour flying night fighters. Gibson's selection was not random. The Air Ministry recognized that the dam's raid would require not just flying skill but the ability to lead men into conditions where any mistake meant instant death. Gibson had demonstrated both technical proficiency and personal courage, qualities essential for inspiring confidence in crews. Being asked to do things that violated every instinct of self-preservation, developed through months of combat operations, he would need to convince experienced aircrew, men who had survived dozens of missions and knew intimately the ways aircraft could be destroyed, that flying at 60 feet at night over hostile territory was not merely survivable but tactically sound. The training regime Gibson developed at Scampton Air Base pushed crews to their limits. Lancaster bombers were large aircraft, four-engine heavies designed for high-altitude operations where margin for error was measured in hundreds of feet. Flying them at 60 feet required complete trust in instruments, perfect coordination between pilot and flight engineer, and absolute concentration maintained over hundreds of miles. Gibson had crews practice low-level navigation across England's reservoir systems, flying at night at precisely 60 feet, at exactly 240 miles per hour. The altitude problem seemed insoluble at first. At night, even in moonlight, judging height above water was nearly impossible. Altimeters worked by measuring air pressure, which varied with weather and was insufficiently precise for the margins required. A variation of just 20 feet either direction could mean mission failure. The solution came from a suggestion by the squadron's bomb aimer. Flying officer Spam Spafford mount to spotlights under the aircraft, angled to converge at exactly 60 feet. When the spots merged into a figure-8 pattern on the water surface, the aircraft was at correct altitude. Distance measurement from the dam wall used an even simpler solution. 2 wooden posts would be mounted on the aircraft's nose, positioned so that when the pilot looked through them at the dam towers flanking the wall, the posts aligned with the towers at exactly 425 yards distance. Medieval technology solving a modern precision bombing problem. The bombs themselves, officially designated upkeep but universally called bouncing bombs by crews, were manufactured under extreme secrecy at Vickers facilities. Each bomb required precision machining of the cylindrical casing, careful packing of 6,600 pounds of Torpex explosive, and installation of the hydrostatic fuse mechanism that would trigger detonation at 30 feet depth. The rotating mechanism that would spin the bomb was an engineering challenge unto itself. It had to accelerate the 9,250-pound cylinder to 500 RPM in the seconds before release, then cleanly disengage to allow the bomb to drop free. Testing occurred at locations across England, with Wallis and Gibson working together to refine the weapon and delivery technique. Early tests revealed problems. Bombs striking the water broke apart, their casings insufficient to handle impact forces. Wallis redesigned the casing, adding reinforcement while maintaining the weight limitations the Lancaster could carry. The spinning mechanism jammed. Engineers redesigned the clutch. The hydrostatic fuses failed. Improved designs were rushed into production by May 1943. With just weeks remaining before the mission window closed, the dams had to be attacked when reservoirs were full in spring, or the reduced water depth would cushion explosive force 14. Practice bombs had been dropped. 7 had worked as intended, and Gibson was declaring his crews ready. The Air Ministry authorized the mission with considerable reservation. Success would achieve strategic impact far exceeding the resources invested. Failure would cost 19 Lancaster bombers, 133 highly trained aircrew, and irreplaceable bouncing bombs, all for no gain. The night of May 16 to 17, 1943, 19 Lancasters lifted off from Scampton in 3 waves, each wave assigned specific targets. Gibson would lead the first wave of 9 aircraft against the MCN, the primary target. If the MCN was destroyed with bombs remaining, he would proceed to the Möhne Dam. The second wave of 5 aircraft would attack the Sorp Dam, which required different tactics due to its earth-fill construction. A third wave of 5 aircraft would serve as airborne reserve, attacking secondary targets if the primary dams were destroyed or providing backup if earlier waves suffered losses. The route to the targets took the formations across Holland and Germany at treetop height, a low-level penetration designed to fly under German radar coverage. At 60 feet, the Lancasters were below the altitude most radar systems could reliably track, making them nearly invisible to German air defense networks. But low altitude brought different dangers. The aircraft had to navigate around known flak concentrations, avoid high-tension power lines, maintain formation in darkness, and arrive at their targets with sufficient fuel remaining for the attack and return journey. Gibson's formation crossed the Dutch coast at 2,250 hours, moonlight reflecting off canals and rivers that served as navigation checkpoints. The Lancasters flew so low that crews could see people in lit windows, vehicles on roads, even individual trees. German defenders, caught completely unprepared for low-altitude attack, fired sporadically but without coordination. 2 aircraft were hit by light flak during the crossing, one damaged but continuing, another struck in a fuel tank and forced to abort. The formation pressed on, crossing into Germany shortly after midnight. The approach to the Möhne Dam required threading through a valley at high speed while climbing to attack. The altitude of 60 feet above the reservoir surface, which itself sat in a depression surrounded by hills. Gibson made the run first, demonstrating the attack profile for his following aircraft. His bomb aimer Flying Officer Spafford lay prone in the nose, watching the spotlight figurate on the water while calling altitude adjustments. Flight engineer Sergeant Pulford monitored engine instruments while adjusting throttles to maintain exactly 240 miles per hour. Navigator Pilot Officer Terham confirmed their position, though by this point navigation was visual. The dam's massive towers were clearly visible in moonlight ahead. Gibson's wireless operator, Flight Lieutenant Hutchison, had activated the bomb-spinning mechanism 2 minutes before the attack run, the hydraulic motor accelerating the 9,250-pound cylinder to 500 RPM inside its cradle beneath the fuselage. The Lancaster vibrated from the massive spinning weight, requiring constant control inputs to maintain level flight. As the 2 wooden posts on the nose aligned with the dam towers, Spafford pressed the release button. The spinning bomb dropped free, struck the water surface, bounced into the air trailing spray, struck again, bounced higher, struck a third time, then skipped low and fast toward the dam wall. German anti-aircraft gunners on the dam towers, who had begun firing when Gibson's Lancaster appeared, watched in confused amazement as the cylindrical object skipped across the reservoir like a stone. It struck the dam wall with visible impact, disappeared below the surface while still pressed against the concrete by its backspin, and sank out of sight. Gibson pulled the Lancaster into a climbing turn, clearing the hills beyond the dam. 30 seconds later, the reservoir surface erupted in a massive explosion that threw water hundreds of feet into the air. When the spray cleared, the dam wall remained intact. Gibson's bomb had worked perfectly, but had detonated slightly too far from the optimal position to crack the massive structure. The mission required multiple hits, exactly as planned. Gibson circled while his second aircraft, piloted by Flight Lieutenant Hopgood, began its attack run. German anti-aircraft fire, now fully alert and coordinated, concentrated on the approaching Lancaster. Tracers arced across the reservoir. Hopgood's aircraft was hit multiple times during the approach, one engine catching fire, but he held course long enough for his bomb aimer to release. The spinning bomb struck the water, bounced once, cleared the dam wall entirely, and exploded behind the structure, causing damage to the power station below, but not affecting the dam itself. Hopgood's Lancaster, burning and losing altitude, crashed into hills beyond the dam. Only 2 crew members survived. Flight Lieutenant Martin made the third attack, his bomb striking the dam wall and detonating in proper position. The explosion sent massive shock waves through the structure, but the concrete held. Flight Lieutenant Young attacked fourth, his bomb striking perfectly and detonating at optimal depth. The dam wall now showed visible damage, water seeping through cracks in the concrete. Flight Lieutenant Meltby attacked 5th. His bomb struck the dam wall, sank, and detonated with tremendous force. The shock wave from this explosion transmitted through water and concrete already weakened by previous hits. He exceeded the structure's remaining strength. A small breach appeared near the dam's center, water beginning to pour through. Within seconds, the breach widened as hydraulic pressure forced its way into cracks. The enormous weight of 140 million tons of water seeking release, the breach expanded rapidly, chunks of concrete breaking free and tumbling down the dam face in the flood. Within minutes, a gap 250 feet wide had opened, water pouring through with such force that it created a wave 30 feet high, racing down the valley below. Gibson orbited overhead, watching the destruction with a mixture of elation and horror. The engineering marvel that had taken years to construct was disintegrating in minutes. The strategic objective was achieved. The MCN dam was destroyed, but hundreds of people in the valley below, German and Allied prisoners of war, civilians working night shifts in factories, would be caught by the flood. War is essential moral contradiction, that achieving necessary strategic objectives required actions that directly harmed innocents, was never clearer than in those moments above the disintegrating dam. With the MG destroyed, Gibson led his remaining aircraft to the Eder Dam, 40 miles southeast. This target presented even greater difficulty than the MGN. The reservoir sat in a narrow valley, surrounded by high hills, requiring an approach that dove into the valley, leveled at 60 feet above water, released the bomb, then pulled into a steep climb to avoid the hills beyond the dam. Practice had been impossible. The unique geography made simulation at training locations impractical. Crews would make their first low-level approach to the E-door while under combat conditions. At night, after hours of intense flying, Flight Lieutenant Shannon attacked first. His approach angle was wrong, forcing him to abort and circle for another attempt. On the second run, he released his bomb, which struck the water but failed to achieve the skip pattern, sinking before reaching the dam wall. Flight Lieutenant Maudsley attacked next. His bomb released slightly late. It struck the dam top and exploded prematurely, the detonation severely damaging Maudsley's Lancaster. The aircraft, crippled and losing altitude, attempted to fly home but was shot down over Germany with no survivors. Flight Lieutenant Knight made the final attack on the Ed, his bomb aimer having watched the previous attempts and adjusted the release point accordingly. The spinning bomb skipped perfectly across the reservoir, struck the dam wall, sank to optimal depth, and detonated precisely where needed. The explosion, combined with the enormous water pressure behind the dam, cracked the structure. Water began pouring through breaches that rapidly expanded. Within minutes, the Eder Dam had failed as completely as the MGN, releasing its reservoir in a devastating flood down the Eder Valley. The return flight faced German defenses now fully alert and coordinated. Aircraft were tracked by searchlights, engaged by flak batteries, pursued by night fighters. 5 Lancasters failed to return from the mission. Of the 133 aircrew who had taken off from Scampton, 53 were killed and 3 captured. The loss rate, nearly 40%, exceeded typical bomber command operations and would have been considered catastrophic in a conventional raid. But Operation Chastise was not a conventional raid. The 2 dams destroyed released approximately 330 million tons of water that flooded the Ruhr and Edor valleys, destroying factories, cutting transportation networks, washing away bridges, and forcing diversion of thousands of workers to recovery efforts. Electrical power production dropped significantly. Most importantly, the psychological impact resonated throughout Germany and Allied nations. The Germans had believed their dams invulnerable. The Allies had demonstrated that British engineering ingenuity and aircrew courage could destroy targets thought unreachable. The strategic debate about the dam's raid's effectiveness continued throughout the war and persists among historians today. Immediate damage was substantial but temporary. The Germans rebuilt both dams with remarkable speed, the MGN returning to operation within months, though it reduced capacity. The floods killed an estimated 1,600 people, many of them prisoners of war and forced laborers. From a strict cost-to-benefit analysis, the loss of 8 Lancasters and 53 aircrew was difficult to justify against damage that was largely repaired within a year, but strategic impact cannot be measured solely in tons of water released or factories destroyed. The dam's raid demonstrated British technical sophistication and operational capability at a time when the bombing campaign's effectiveness was seriously questioned. It proved that precision attacks against specific targets could succeed, influencing the development of specialized bombing tactics that would be used for the war's remainder. It forced Germany to divert resources to protecting infrastructure previously considered invulnerable. Most significantly, it provided a morale boost to Allied populations and a corresponding blow to German confidence at a critical juncture of the war. Barnes Wallis, watching from Scampton as the returning aircraft landed in early morning light, knew that 8 crews had not returned. His brilliant engineering solution had worked exactly as calculated, but that success had cost lives. He struggled with this contradiction throughout his life. The knowledge that his inventions, however cleverly designed, were ultimately instruments of destruction. He continued developing weapons technology through the war's end, including the Tallboy and Grand Slam bombs, always seeking solutions that would achieve strategic objectives with minimum loss of life, though recognizing that in warfare, minimum loss was still loss. Guy Gibson received the Victoria Cross for leading the dam's raid, Britain's highest military decoration. 33 other crew members received immediate decorations for gallantry. Gibson's subsequent public relations tour, where he described the raid to boost morale and support war bond drives, troubled him deeply. He found it difficult to speak enthusiastically about an operation where so many friends had died, where the successful destruction of engineering marvels had directly caused civilian deaths. He returned to operations later in 1944. Flying as a master bomber directing raids, and was killed in September 1944 when his aircraft crashed, returning from a raid on Germany. He was 26 years old. The bouncing bomb itself never saw operational use again after the dam's raid. The specific conditions required for its successful employment, large static water targets, precision, low-level flying, element of surprise, were not repeated elsewhere. The weapon had been designed for a particular problem, had solved that problem brilliantly, and then became obsolete. This pattern of specialized weapons development for specific challenges characterized much British innovation during the war, contrasting with American approaches that emphasized standardized weapons in overwhelming numbers. The Lancasters of 617 Squadron continued operations throughout the war, transitioning to delivering Tallboy and Grand Slam bombs against hardened targets. The squadron became the Royal Air Force's premier precision bombing unit, tasked with attacks requiring exceptional accuracy against small targets. Their success at the dams established a tradition of technical excellence and tactical innovation that continued throughout the war and persists in successor squadrons today. The story of the dam's raid reveals fundamental truths about how technology and human skill intersect in warfare. Barnes Wallis's bouncing bomb was a triumph of engineering that solved a problem conventional weapons could not address, but the weapon was useless without crews capable of delivering it under extraordinary conditions. Gibson and his aircrews transformed theoretical calculations into practical results through skill, courage, and determination that transcended normal operational requirements. Neither brilliant engineering nor exceptional flying skill alone would have succeeded. Both were necessary, and both were present on the night of May 16th to 17th, 1943. The mission demonstrated that even in technological warfare, where engineering sophistication and industrial capacity matter enormously, human judgment and skill remain decisive. The bouncing bomb's complex physics, the calculations of spin rates and release points, the engineering of rotating mechanisms and hydrostatic fuselage, this sophistication would have been meaningless if crews had not possessed the ability to fly 60 feet above water at night, maintaining precise speed while German gunners fired at them, holding course long enough for bombs to release properly. Technology enabled the mission, but human factors determined its success. As dawn broke over Scampton on May 17, 1943, 11 Lancasters had returned from 19 that departed. Guy Gibson stood on the airfield, watching ground crews examine his aircraft, counting flak holes, assessing damage. The mission had succeeded. Both primary dams were destroyed, but the price had been high, paid by men who would never see another sunrise. Standing there in early morning light, Gibson understood what subsequent history would confirm: that the dam's raid represented something beyond its immediate strategic impact. It demonstrated that courage and skill, combined with engineering brilliance, could achieve the seemingly impossible. That careful calculation and bold execution could overcome defenses designed to be impenetrable. That in warfare, as in all human endeavors, imagination and determination matter as much as resources and firepower. These lessons, written in water and steel and human sacrifice across 2 German valleys on a single spring night in 1943, resonated far beyond their immediate context, influencing how nations approached the challenges of technological warfare for generations that followed.